I think this is probably the most consequential offseason for what the tenure of Lance Leipold will look like for Kansas, whether it's continues to be on an upward trajectory, and he can continue to kind of build this program to being a consistent, Big 12 title contender. I mean, look, the reality is we just saw a team that was picked to finish last in the Big 12 win the conference championship. So the Big 12 is as wide open right now and for the future as it probably ever has been. And I don't think there's any reason why Kansas couldn't, throw their hat in the ring and be in that conversation. So that's what I think is going to make this offseason so critical for this KU football staff.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Pay heed, all who enter. Beware of this podcast. That's right. This is the Pay Heed podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer. I'm here solo today. No Kevin Flaherty with me right now for this show, but some breaking news in the land of KU football that we're going to be talking about on today's show. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. As always, be sure to check them out. I'm with Emprise Bank and I love them, so be sure to check them out. So no Kevin Flaherty here with me today, so just me here talking some KU football. A lot of breaking news happening this weekend for Kansas football. I want to start, we'll kind of go in chronological order here a little bit, starting with the Jalon Daniels news, which came earlier in the weekend with Jalon Daniels announcing that he's going to be returning to Kansas for his final season. All along, it was obvious that Jalon Daniels was going to be back to play another year in college. The question was whether that would be at Kansas or somewhere else, right? And honestly, it'd been pretty quiet about what his intentions were really after the end of the season for KU. But then it does announce that he's going to be returning to Kansas for his final season, which is very significant, right? I think from the Kansas perspective, no Jalon Daniels meant that you were probably going to be looking into the transfer portal anyways to bring another quarterback to sort of add to your room with Cole Ballard and with Isaiah Marshall. I think a lot of fans are excited about Isaiah Marshall and what he could potentially bring, but I don't think another year of being behind Jalon Daniels is a bad thing either, as well for Isaiah Marshall. And so Jalon Daniels, look, the start of the year for him was obviously a bit bumpy. He really struggled. Was clear that he was dealing with some rust issues, right? Kevin talked a lot about that on this show with me. And I think that ended up being the case, is that he was dealing with that. And then in the second half of the season, he really started to figure some things out, played some really, really great football for Kansas down the stretch. I continue to look back to that K-State game as a game where he really, I think, displayed who he is as a true Jayhawk, true football player with what he did in that game. Unfortunately, Kansas is going to get the win, but very significant, right? And you think about the fact that, think about Jalon Daniels playing in the new booth. Like, that's going to be pretty cool. That's going to be pretty exciting to see, is Jalon playing in the new booth. So that's something to look forward to. All in all, I think this is a win for Kansas. I think it's a win-win for everybody involved, right? I think for Jalon Daniels, like I said, regardless, he was probably going to be playing another year of college football this year. If his goal continues to be to get to the NFL, with the way this season kind of transpired, that's probably not something that was realistic for him. So it was pretty obvious he was probably going to be looking to come back to college, right? And I think from the Kansas perspective, it's significant because, look, you're losing a lot off of this Kansas team on both sides of the ball, but particularly on offense, right? No more Devin Neal. No more Savion Morrison, which we can get to. No more Daniel Highshaw. You're losing your top three receivers as well on the outside. No more Jared Casey. No more Trevor Cardell. You hope Deshaun Hannick is going to come back. You think he probably will after his injury, but we'll see what he can bring. You look at the offensive line. You're losing Logan Brown at this point. You're going to lose Bryce Cable-Dew. Like, you're losing a very significant amount from this offense. And to bring back a veteran quarterback who is a proven leader, who has shown that he can be an elite quarterback, right? Like, people are quick to forget about what he was able to do prior to some of his injuries previously in his career. In leading Kansas to a 5-0 start in 2022 before that injury, what he was able to do. And obviously down the stretch of this season, you look at the numbers. Certainly the numbers this year don't really jump out. He struggled with interceptions early in the year, but still, I have a lot of faith in Jalon Daniels. And I think a full offseason, I think the conversation really you could get into is, hey, maybe this past offseason, Kansas didn't push Jalon Daniels enough. Maybe they were worried about him re-aggravating injury or whatever, or having more of an injury. I think maybe that's where you could have the conversation is, hey, look, this coaching staff maybe didn't push Jalon Daniels enough, didn't get him enough, live reps, or didn't get him enough quickly acclimated back to playing football. And maybe that was kind of what contributed to his rough start. But I have no doubt that you give this guy a full offseason, a full healthy offseason, he could come back and be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12, right? I think that's still certainly something that's very, very possible for him. and he's shown with that capability. But yeah, on top of that, again, with everything you're losing, like this is best case scenario, I think, for Kansas. And I think beyond that, it's a great scenario for KU because one of my concerns about Jalon Daniels possibly, delaying his decision or kind of taking his time and thinking about it or, deciding what he wants to do is that from the Kansas perspective, you're trying to reload. You're trying to bring in new skill position players. You're trying to bring in new guys to help fill out this offensive roster, new weapons, and so on and so forth. And look, I mean, it's hard to sit here and say, hey, if you are a wide receiver in the transfer portal and you're looking at teams you want to go to, and Kansas comes to you and says, hey, we'd love for you to come to KU, but we don't know who our quarterback is going to be yet because Jalon Daniels hasn't decided, or we might need to find our own transfer at quarterback position. That just adds another layer of difficulty, I think, to it for Kansas. So now I think for KU, from this coaching staff perspective, it's a great opportunity to say, hey, look, we've got a guy who's a proven leader. We've got a guy who was a preseason offensive player of the year at one point in 2023. Like, he is a legit star. And if you are a skill position player at wide receiver or even running back, now you want to come play with this guy, right? Because he has proven that he can be that elite level. So I think that's really the biggest positive for this coaching staff is now they know for sure, hey, look, this is our guy. This is our guy for the next season. And now we have that as a selling point to some other top transfers in the portal that we could go after to sort of add to this offense. So I think it's very significant that Jalon Daniels is coming back. I think it's hard not to be excited about it, right? It gives KU a sense of stability, I think, going into 2025. I think if Jalon Daniels were to move on, right, Isaiah Marshall is somebody you can certainly be excited about, but there would be a lot of uncertainty there, right, if that was the case with either Isaiah Marshall or if whether Kansas did try to go into the transfer portal and find a different sort of bridge quarterback, I guess, so to speak. So I think this is a significant announcement for KU and for Jalon Daniels as well. And I mentioned it, Savion Morrison, devastating news. Devastating news from my brand that Savion Morrison is entering the transfer portal for Kansas. But that just opens it up possibly for KU to add more at the running back position, I guess. Already have the transfer from Iowa, LaShawn Williams, coming in. So they may look to add more there. So obviously this is going to be a pretty hectic offseason, I think, for Kansas. And again, Jalon Daniels coming back provides some stability to that. So speaking of a hectic offseason, it turned into a hectic couple of 24 to 48 hours for Kansas at the coordinator position, with them making some big changes. First, I just want to say this. With Jeff Grimes, the discussion with Jeff Grimes, for me at least, and I've stated on the show, I didn't expect Jeff Grimes to be gone. Like, I thought he would be back. And in saying that, I was basically implying that I didn't think KU would fire him. What I didn't expect to happen is that another school would come in and try to hire him away from Kansas. That was unexpected, but that came out with Wisconsin looking into hiring Jeff Grimes and then seemingly making it official. And now Kansas has announced that Jim Zebrowski is going to be promoted to offensive coordinator. So starting with the Grimes discussion, look, I think with Jeff Grimes, I just finished talking about Jalon Daniels and sort of the struggles that he had to start the season. I think that compounded with the fact that Jeff Grimes was still trying to maybe figure out how to apply his philosophy or what he wanted to do within this offense, really kind of caused the Kansas offense to just struggle early in the season, right? And even with that being said, you look at some of the early season losses for Kansas. I mean, against West Virginia, I don't think you can point to the offense at all, right? They did their job. They had an 11-point lead with 4 minutes left in the game. Obviously, they had a chance to close that one out, but couldn't do it. But you don't expect the defense to give up that lead. You think about the Arizona State game, a late score by Kansas on the offensive end put them up. Then the defense unable to stop Arizona State on a game-winning drive. And listen, Arizona State, obviously Big 12 champs now, that Kansas game may have been one of the toughest games they played. So that's really telling, I think, about where this Kansas team potentially could have been if they could have gotten off to a stronger start this season. So, and then you look at conference-only play. I mean, look, in conference-only play, the Kansas offense was one of the best in the Big 12 by a lot of metrics, right? Number one in points per drive being the biggest one. So they got things figured out. They figured some things out. They were getting Devin Neal the ball. Jalon Daniels obviously really, really stepped it up as well and sort of hit his stride down the stretch also. But yeah, I did not expect Jeff Grimes to be fired for a variety of reasons, but I didn't expect him also to be hired away by another school. And then Wisconsin comes in to hire him away. And look, the other thing with Jeff Grimes is, and why I think if you're a Wisconsin fan, I guess if you're looking at the Kansas fan reaction, you would be worried. But Jeff Grimes, I still think Jeff Grimes is probably one of the best run schemers out there. I think he's really, really good with scheming up run blocking and scheming up run plays and run design. what is Wisconsin known for? What does Wisconsin want to do? They want to scheme up and run HB dive a lot. So I don't know. Could be a good fit, actually. This could be really kind of a win-win for all parties involved, right? I think obviously with kind of the way the season unfolded for Kansas, we talked about it earlier in the year, felt like some changes kind of needed to be made. And again, I think with what Kansas did and with the contract they gave Jeff Grimes, it didn't seem like that was going to be something that was possible with him, but we'll get to some other changes they did make coming up here in just a few minutes. But yeah, this could be a win-win for all parties involved. I think for Kansas, it's a chance to, reset a little bit. And then with Jeff Grimes being gone to Wisconsin, Jim Zebrowski was announced as the being promoted to the offensive coordinator position. And this is an interesting case because it's a situation where you would think, okay, well, what are you going to get with Jim Zebrowski? Well, the good news is we have a sample size of Jim Zebrowski as offensive coordinator. He did it in the bowl game for KU against UNLV at the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. And I think the sample size there was a Jim Zebrowski-led offense is going to be one that probably is going to look to attack and look for big plays a lot. You think about what Jason Bean did in that game for UNLV against UNLV, threw a lot of touchdowns, also threw some interceptions as well. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. But yeah, all in all, I can't say I'm surprised that Lance Leipold decided to go internally. I don't think that's shocking at all. He's somebody that rides for his guys, right? So that's not surprising. But I think if you're excited about Jim Zebrowski, there's a lot to be excited about. He's an interesting personality. We've gotten to talk to him a number of times. He's quite the character, and I think he has a chance to really lead this Kansas offense and get things going. Now, obviously, the thing here is the overarching theme of this that I've touched on is, hey, look, whether it's Jeff Grimes, Jim Zebrowski, whatever, the reality of the situation is Kansas is losing a ton of production, and they're going to have to go out and bring in a lot of different guys to play on the field, right? So if just setting aside whoever is going to be calling the plays, there's still a lot of work to be done for Kansas, certainly this offseason and the transfer portal and putting together what kind of team they want to be in 2025 on the offensive end. All right, spent a lot of time talking about the offense there, and obviously with Jalon Daniels and on the offense, but how about some more big changes on the defensive side of the ball? We'll get to that coming up on the other side of this break. First, got to tell you about, as always, our friends over at Home Field Apparel. This is a great opportunity to be repping your Home Field Apparel. Recording this on Sunday morning ahead of the KU Missouri game, so you definitely want to get it on in time for KU Missouri on the basketball side, which Kevin and I will be talking about that game coming up later early this week after that game on Sunday afternoon. So it's a great opportunity to rep your Home Field Apparel. They've got a fantastic gear. They've got some great basketball gear as well. The Slam and Jayhawks, I know, is a fan favorite. So if you got that shirt, be sure to rep it today for KU against Missouri. And you can rep it anytime and always. I mean, I get tons of compliments on my Home Field Apparel when I'm walking around out and about. People ask me, hey, where'd you get that from? And I tell them, homefieldapparel.com. And then I don't actually tell them this, but then I think to myself, hey, if you want 50% off your first order, you can use promo code PAY24 over at homefieldapparel.com. Listen, the holidays are right around the corner, so you probably want to get in those orders quickly if you're looking to get something for a possible Christmas gift for a family member or a friend. All right, more KU football talk is coming up on the other side.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your number one source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
This is the Paid Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer. Solo today, no Kevin Flaherty with me here. We'll be back later on this week to talk more KU football, more KU basketball as well. Be sure to like, subscribe, drop a comment, share your thoughts. Obviously, tons of breaking news for Kansas football with Jalon Daniels, with the switches at the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator, which we're about to get into. So you can drop a comment, share your thoughts in the comments on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. You can also like, subscribe to the channel, and also subscribe or leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen on the audio side as well. Okay, so we talked a little bit about JD coming back, talked about Grimes being gone, Jim Zebrowski coming in. Now you flip over to the defensive side with more news on Sunday morning of Brian Borland expected to step down for Kansas defensive coordinator position, and then a report from CBS Sports saying that DK McDonald is expected to be named the new defensive coordinator for Kansas. So, look, the Kansas defense has always been the weaker unit under Lance Leipold. I don't think that's any surprise. Andy Kolecki did a great job with the Kansas offense. And then, with this 1 year of Grimes, started off slow, but Kansas still ended up being statistically a really, really strong offense down the stretch and did some good things in some big games. On the defensive side, I don't really know that you can necessarily say the same. This defense had a lot of talent in the secondary, and that talent stepped up and made plays. Kobe Bryant, Noah Dotson, obviously, in the secondary. But overall, this was still a disappointing year for the defense. And I think you can point to a number of games where that is the case. Mentioned the West Virginia game. You got an 11-point lead with 4 minutes left. You lose that one. Give up a late touchdown against Arizona State. You think about that 9-minute touchdown drive that they gave up against UNLV early in the year in non-conference play. So not a lot of positives to take away from this defense. This was a bottom 100 defense, again, metrically in a lot of stats, and for another year, right? And you looked at some of the improvements that this Kansas defense had made. I mean, they had made significant improvements when you think back to like 2021 and 2022 and 2023. That really wasn't the case this year. There wasn't really much improvement from the defense this year for Kansas. And Brian Borland has been with Lance Leipold for, I think, 20 plus years at this point. So those guys are really, really tight. And, whatever the discussion was that they need to make a change, I'm sure it was a difficult one, but I think this is a situation where it just felt like this was the right thing, right? It feels like this is the right thing to do. I think, if you're the head coach, if you're Lance Leipold, you got to understand, yes, loyalty and yes, staff continuity is one thing, but sometimes different voices can be a positive. Sometimes, stagnation is something you can be worried about. I think if you have the same staff over and over again, and that's maybe I think what we saw a little bit from the defense. Like I don't really think that there was any path to Brian Borland to making this defense significantly better, right? Like that's just the writing's kind of on the wall there. I think maybe they'd sort of hit his ceiling, I guess, basically as a defensive coordinator, maybe at this level, I guess would be the best way to put it. But this seemed like the right decision to make. This seemed like the right change to make. And then the question became, okay, well, who you replace him with, right? I think for me, Jordan Peterson was the obvious first choice, I think, from Texas A&M, right? Leaves Kansas to go to Texas A&M for kind of the same reasons of Jim Zebrowski, right? We've seen what Jordan Peterson can do as a defensive coordinator for Kansas because he did it in a couple games last year when Brian Borland dealt with a health issue. So he seemed like the obvious choice, but it seems like, for whatever reason, probably, I'm sure it was money related. I mean, you think about possibly what the buyout might have been to get him away from Texas A&M. I think he's a Texas A&M alum, I'm pretty sure, or he has ties to Texas A&M as well. So maybe that was just something that was too tough to do. And so then you get the report that it seems like DK McDonald is going to be the guy for defensive coordinator for Kansas. And that's an interesting one because you kind of look around, if it wasn't going to be Jordan Peterson, in terms of like an internal staff promotion, there wasn't really any obvious choice, I don't think, when you look at like, a Jim Panagos, Dan Samuel, whatever, Chris Simpson, those types of guys, like none of them really stood out as somebody that could be an obvious choice for promotion. And then you think about what Lance Leipold did this past offseason when he conducted his search looking for a new offensive coordinator. He ended up with Jeff Grimes, and obviously, depending on who you ask it, that was kind of a disastrous hire. I mean, obviously the offense ended up being good, like I mentioned, but still maybe fell short of expectations for various reasons. So I don't know. You look at DK McDonald, he's a former NFL coach. He was at Iowa State as well. I think for DK McDonald, he's got strong recruiting ties as well to the area, so that could be significant for Kansas also. And I think he's a guy you have to look to and probably trust with some of the experiences that he has previously. So I don't know. It's curious. I think when you look at promoting two internal coaches to your coordinator positions, on one hand, it can be viewed as a little uninspiring. On the other hand, again, it's obvious that Lance Leipold extremely values the staff continuity aspect of it, staff integrity, so on and so forth. Guys that know the system, guys that understand what Lance Leipold's looking for, understand, what the process is. So that I think is certainly a positive. But yeah, the defense is going to be an interesting one. And similarly to the offense, the defense is going to be losing a lot, right? I mean, you're talking over 40 players that are going to be departing from this Kansas program on both sides of the ball. So there's going to be a lot of work to do on that end. Obviously, as well, when you think about losing your top two corners, you've also had a couple corners in at the transfer portal or declared to end of the transfer portal. And then you look at the front seven, you're going to be losing some guys in linebacker. That's going to be a big need for Kansas as well. They've gotten Bengali Kamara, the transfer from South Carolina. So I don't know. There's a lot up in the air there on both sides of the ball, really. And I will say this. I think it's probably in the best interest of Kansas that these things were decided now, like as quickly as possible, because again, the staff has a mountain to climb in front of them this offseason. I mean, this is probably the most critical offseason that will determine, the tenure of Lance Leipold with Kansas, right? Because he's got to find a way to reload. He's got to find a way to rebuild this roster with some of these seniors that he's lost. And look, some of the recruits that some of the guys that were on this roster that were seniors that left, those guys were not Leipold recruits, right? Devin Neal, for example, was not a Leipold recruit. So I think this is probably the most consequential offseason for what the tenure of Lance Leipold will look like for Kansas, whether it's continues to be on an upward trajectory, and he can continue to kind of build this program to being a consistent, Big 12 title contender. I mean, look, the reality is we just saw a team that was picked to finish last in the Big 12 win the conference championship. So the Big 12 is as wide open right now and for the future as it probably ever has been. And I don't think there's any reason why Kansas couldn't, throw their hat in the ring and be in that conversation. So that's what I think is going to make this offseason so critical for this KU football staff. And to get these announcements out of the way and to get these decisions done early with now, Jalon Daniels is coming back. Okay. Quarterback, check mark, done there. That's one less thing you have to worry about. Now with Jeff Grimes, moving on and getting Jim Zebrowski promoted, check mark, offensive coordinator, you're good there. On the defensive side of the ball, you've made the decision quickly. Hey, Brian Borland, you've been great. You've been great, obviously, with Lance Leipold. You've been with him for 20 plus years, but it's probably time to get some fresh ideas in there. Brian Borland leaves. Now you have your new defensive coordinator with DK McDonald. Check mark. Those are three pretty critical things, I would argue, that are out of the way and done with. Now you can say, okay, let's focus on building this roster. Let's focus on looking at the transfer portal and figuring out how we can put together this team to excel in 2025. Because again, the Big 12 continues to appear as if it's as wide open as ever. I mean, you had a conference title game with Arizona State and Iowa State, right? So it's wide open as ever. Utah's got a ton of questions. You look at Colorado, what their future may be with Coach Prime, who knows, right? I mean, he could easily be looking to move on now that kind of his sons have gone through that program. Oklahoma State obviously had the catastrophe with Mike Gundy, and then he was fired. Wait, no, he wasn't fired. Now he's back, but who knows what that's going to look like going forward. So there is a real opportunity here for Kansas to potentially step up. And they've made some decisions here early in this offseason that I think should set them up to be able to continue to try to drive forward and looking into the 2025 as being a very significant year. But yeah, it really does feel like these next basically, 2 to 3 months for Kansas could really define the tenure of Lance Leipold for Kansas, because he's made some big changes. Now he needs to look and try to, rebuild this team and put it in position to be successful in 2025 with a new stadium, with new facilities, all that stuff. So we'll see what he can do and if he can put something together to be successful for Kansas. So, all right. Well, that's kind of the major breaking news of the weekend. Jalon Daniels is back. Jeff Grimes is gone. Jim Zebrowski's in. Brian Borland also stepping down. DK McDonald seemingly the new defensive coordinator for Kansas. Tons of news there. Tons of news. Be sure to share your thoughts. You can drop a comment to share your thoughts on our YouTube channel, like Kansas Jocks KCSN. You can subscribe there, like the channel. You can also subscribe wherever you get your audio versions of the show as well. You can leave a 5-star rating and review there also. Kevin Flaherty is going to be back with me here early this week. We're going to be talking some KU basketball with KU taking on Missouri coming up later on Sunday afternoon. And we'll be talking certainly more KU football as more news continues to break and they continue to try to put things together this offseason heading into 2025 as well. And that's about going to wrap things up here for this show. A bit of a shorter show, but a bit of just a sort of a quick snapshot of some of the breaking news that Kansas had over this weekend. So, like I said, we'll be back talking more KU football, more KU basketball coming up later on. And again, be sure to comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff helps us grow the channel here on KCSN and on our YouTube channel. So, until then, for just myself with Kevin Flaherty, I'm Nick Springer. We'll talk to you again soon. See ya.